Okay, I'm back for another Blue review, and this one is going to be further reflections on Twin Peaks. The one that I did called Reflections on Twin Peaks was, I guess, within the context of my limited audience for my channel, a hit, and um, that makes me happy. I know Twin Peaks is something that people love to talk about. It's just a kind of a cult phenomenon that will never go away, thank goodness. And in the last installment, I spoke a good. I showed you the. Well, first of all, I showed you the Blu-ray collections that I had in my library, and within those, kind of glanced over seasons 1 and 2 because those are a little more widely seen, and um, they kind of set the groundwork. I don't want to kind of go through a whole like episode by episode thing describing that, or even an overview of the season. I feel like that's kind of ensconced, in memory, in the collective memory. And if you haven't seen them, I recommend you, as soon as humanly possible, watch seasons 1 and 2. But do it before you watch the other ones, even though you may think the 89-90 series is, dated or whatever, what have you. It's been a long time, but it was ahead of its time at the time. So, some people have told me they thought it's dated. That's usually much younger people have exhibited some frustrations with it, but they don't seem to have the same problem with the film or season 3, which is now kind of its own film. But last time I talked a little bit about Firewalk with Me and went through the the Blu-ray of that, and zeroed in on the missing pieces, which were all the deleted scenes that did not appear in the final cut, the 2.5 hour cut of Firewalk with Me. So it was an hour and a half more of material. And how that kind of has a bearing going forward. So this time I'm going to talk about season 3, and in a wider sense, that kind of burning question, what does it all mean? And that's kind of what Twin Peaks freaks seem to have talked about the most over the decades. What the fuck does this series? What's it really about, and what's its meaning? Because it seems to have all these layers and layers of symbols, and it does. It does have many layers. It doesn't just seem to. It is multi-layered. It's very complex, and yet presented as fairly accessible entertainment in the first 2 seasons. Even though a lot of people thought it was very weird, but a lot of us love weird, so it kind of caught on with a good cult audience. The film is a bit darker, Firewalk with Me, and it's kind of like what if Lynch were unleashed from the strictures of network TV. So he did a hard R-rated horror film, a lot of horror and some sex, and but same characters, just a different tone. But even more into the supernatural, esoteric aspects of the series, albeit not as strictly coded as the ones in season 2, which there are quite a lot. A lot of alchemical references encoded and alluded to and referenced outright in the season, which I love about season 2. And a lot of people who diss season 2 just seem to overlook the importance of all that. So then when we got to season 3, it's many years later. So the surviving cast members, almost all the surviving cast members, appeared as their, previous characters. And really then the big onus was on us, the audience, if we so chose to assume that burden of deciphering what did it all mean. And I think season 3, we expected an effort to explain what it's all about. We didn't necessarily demand it or expect it, but we kind of were hoping for it, I guess, in some way or another, that there would be some closure, that there would be some explanations, and not just a continuation. what we got was basically a continuation, not a reboot, not a remake, but a direct continuation, plot-wise, story-wise, from all the previous material, with really very little continuity contradictions, even though a lot of people have read a lot into them, and part of that is because of Mark Frost, the co-creator with David Lynch of Twin Peaks. The books that he did accompanying the series, and there are contradictions in those. And I haven't decided yet to encompass the printed materials as part of my personal, what we call, head canon for Twin Peaks. I've just stuck to the filmed works. I'm kind of like what Star Trek does. Sticking to the filmed works, and that's pretty much what happened. In the official continuity. Bearing that in mind, like I said, we're going into season 3, and we're trying to, not only pick up the lives of these characters and the tense cliffhanger that the original series was left on, which was within the story planned to play out in 25 years. So the series, the return, takes place 25 years after the end of episode 2, and it was shot. I think photography began on it in 25 years after season 2 wrapped, but it didn't come out until 27 years after, in 2017. So summer of 2017 was the return. I'll go ahead and show you this again. This is a lovely box with the 3 roles, though actually he plays 4, but we'll get into that in a minute. The 3 distinct entities that Kyle MacLachlan plays. We've got Dale Cooper, FBI special agent from our old series. We've got Mr. C, his evil doppelganger, who has taken his place on Earth for 25 years. This character was first glimpsed in the last episode of season 2. And then we have this character, some amusing little character named Dougie Jones, he is the same person as Dale physically, but personality-wise, he's the same person as a third being that Mr. C conjured in order to take his place when he was called back into the Black Lodge after 25 years. Now, I realize all this sounds pretty commonplace if you're into Twin Peaks, but listening to myself speak about this stuff without any context, it must sound totally insane. But that's part of the appeal. So here's Laura. Laura is the one, and this is her famous prom picture inside the globe conjured by a character, Senorita Dido, who she dwells in the place called the White Lodge. And basically Laura was destined to be the catalyst for everything. And so that's what I interpret it as. So again, other people might say things like Laura is the one means something totally different, and et cetera, et cetera. And I don't mind that at all, as long as it has some tangential relation to the actual show with some actual evidence that's on camera of what they're talking about. But that's becoming, a slippery slope there with Peaks fans. And I think that's just a certain chunk of Twin Peaks fans, a large chunk, but I don't think it by any means signifies the whole. We're all pretty, we're bringing as much to the art as the art is bringing to us. I think Lynch more or less intended that. There are precedents in cinema of works like that deliberately set out to do that, such as last year at Marienbad, which I covered recently. There were some quotes by Renee and Robbe-Grillet, the director and writer, respectively, of last year. That basically, they wanted you to do some work. They wanted to keep it open and let the audience do it. I can't remember if they actually said that themselves or if that was interpreted from them by critics or journalists at the time, but that was the gist of it. And I remember El Topo's famous old ad campaign, And, you know, it would say things like, if you are great, El Topo is great. If you are not great, El Topo is not great. So it's kind of like putting it on you. You're the mirror, you know, it's all about that. And so if you're an enlightened, illuminated being, then you'll get El Topo. If you're not, if you're kind of not very advanced in your thinking, then you're just going to think it sucks. So that was kind of Jodorowsky's critic-proof maxim there, his declaration and decree. That's Jodorowsky, though. I mean, he's got his own kind of impish, mischievous kind of sense of humor, which a lot of people overlook a lot because it's very dark. That's kind of interlaced throughout all of his work, not just his film work. Um, but you know, he as they say, he keeps it real. And Lynch is the same way. Lynch is seen as a deliberately weird obscurantist by many, but Lynch is really in touch with what's really going on. You know, I mean, there's no artifice. You know, what he says is coming out of him. He's not pretentious. You know, he can be very caustic. He can be hilarious. He can be very studious. He can be just bizarre and oddball. But it's all David Lynch. You know, just as Jodorowsky is a genuine character in the world of arts, so is David Lynch. And so season three. I want to say one more thing about the what does it all mean thing first. Um, when it came down to the wire after season three was over, and there was all this rampant fan speculation about every tiny bit of minutia contained within the entire saga and what it meant. All of it was clues to a grand mystery, which in a way is true. Um, One guy, and I can't remember his name or his YouTube channel. I should have written it down before I embarked on this, but he has done a series. Well, he's done a few videos on Twin Peaks. Then he did a kind of definitive uh, video called Twin Peaks Explained, and then in parentheses, no, really. And it's a 4.5 hour opus. I like his delivery a lot, except for when he imitates David Lynch. I think it's kind of silly, but um, his delivery's good. He's very intelligent. He's intellectual. He's really thought this thing through. And sometimes I've watched parts of that video and been like, wow, okay, yeah, you know, that's exactly it. And then other times I've been like, I don't know, I kind of think he's not factoring in XYZ. Um, People who felt the latter about his videos, he made a reaction video to it. Well, he did more explained, which I think was an hour and a half maybe. And then he did a reaction to his critics, which maybe was an hour or so. He's more long-winded than I am, but he's a lot more concise than I am too. He covers a lot more information in proportion to the amount of verbiage he spews out, whereas I kind of impart a little bit of information that you have to really kind of struggle, like, you know, pulling it through a sieve to get through all the massive, you know, digressions and backtracking that I go through. Um, not an insult on myself, just an acknowledgement that my style might not be for everybody, you know, as far as being so nonlinear and all over the map. You know, it may seem like, okay, well, he's off his meds. He's just, what's he getting at? You know, and I assure you, I am on my meds and I'm not high when I do these videos. Um, though I get that I often seem that way, I'm sure, because of the kind of whole chronal distortion thing when you're high, when you know, you start talking about something and then it goes on and on and on and it stretches out and you're not sure how long you've been talking about it yourself, much less the effect it's having on the people who have either been listening to you for 5 minutes or 5 hours. Um, so I'm much worse when I'm high than this, and I don't think I could do a video when I was high because I think I can barely hold it together when I'm straight. Um, it's all called kind of amusing to me because I enjoy doing these videos and I have fun. So that's my number one motivation. Number one, fun. Number two, therapy. Number three, imparting knowledge and maybe wisdom to others. So entertaining them possibly for a few minutes at a time, or hours, as mine sometimes stretch. But speaking of hours long, the guy who explained Twin Peaks, um, what his final conclusion is, I mean, I won't give it away until I'll talk a little about season 3, but I'll kind of give you an idea. And is basically that Lynch made season 3 to frustrate all of these people who wanted to find a meaning and wanted closure. That seems like an awful lot of trouble to go through just to, as they say, in Britain, have a go or take the piss, with fans. There's an American expression that's very common too, but I'm not locating it in my brain pan right at the moment. Like I said, it seems to be an awful lot of trouble just to do that. I mean, that's a lot of mischief. I mean, we're talking about, 18 hours of stuff filmed, culled out of many more hours filmed. And then we talk about all of the budget involved, the actors, the crew, the extensive legal wrangling with Lynch over the series, and the airtight non-disclosure forms everyone had to sign, so there was no leakage of prior plot points or spoilers before each episode aired on a Sunday. And then there's the matter of Mark Frost, who, like I said, wrote his own books that were kind of his slant on the series in print, and some of the information fleshed out the show, and some of it kind of narrowed the scope of the show and locked it into stuff that contradicted not only season 3, but really wildly contradicted the original series. So what about his work? I mean, he's the one who scripted quite a huge chunk of it and co-plotted it with Lynch. Though the ultimate execution and the final spin on the script, was Lynch's. But, you can't dismiss Mark Frost. It wouldn't have been a real Twin Peaks reunion without the two of them together, working together, because Fire Walk with Me, was just Lynch. And, with some assistance from some other people who had worked on season 2, but it was primarily Lynch's writing, and it was definitely Lynch's, vision of the show. I mean, his take on it, unfettered by ABC or whatever network it originally aired on. CBS owns the rights to distribute this stuff in America now, which I think is weird because I'm pretty sure it didn't air on CBS. Not here anyway. I think it aired on ABC. Someone can correct me in the comments and let me know what station it originally aired on, because I'm drawing a blank as to, actually what it is. Season 3 is basically about these characters that Kyle MacLachlan plays. Lynch breaks this up into 18 series-like episodes, and each one has the same opening as the old series, except it doesn't list any cast, so it's not as long an introduction. The other one used to be very long, and so there's a lot of footage of waterfalls and the pretty forests around Twin Peaks and landscapes, while Angelo Badalamenti's incredible music is playing, his iconic theme and for Twin Peaks. And so with cutting all those long lists of actors out, then you can just have kind of a compact version of that as the beginning credits to every episode. And not only that, but every episode ended with end credits, which were spun over the closing part of a different band, a real life band, except in one case, a fictional band, playing at the Roadhouse, where people used to go and listen to music and party in the old series and in Fire Walk with Me. And the lyrics would roll as that song was ending, and it would say, starring Kyle MacLachlan. And that's it. Then it would have cast and who was in that particular episode. And sometimes the reveal of their names, which are not given in the episode, sometimes initially, gave you clues going forward about some things that have happened. Sometimes they were accurate. You could glean something accurate, sometimes not. But that's kind of the nature of season 3, is that we were guessing, and it was an exciting time. It came out in the summer of 2017, and I talked about this in my last Twin Peaks video, so I'll probably repetitious here, but um, there was this excitement among people when this series came out that was unlike a lot of unlike any other modern television series. Uh, there were no previews for next week. There were no recaps from last week. There were no internet spoilers. There was no leaked footage. Each week was a revelation, and we would be talking about it from week to week. Like, what do you think of that episode? What do you think is going to happen next? And again, what does it all mean? But we didn't care because we had Twin Peaks back, and that's what was important to us. We were reunited with our lost love. And the guy who did the lengthy explained video, he covers a lot of this kind of ground. I mean, his video had a little influence on me. His final conclusions, like I said, seem on the face of them maybe a little cynical, because it's like saying Twin Peaks just did all this to troll the audience. That was the phrase or word I was looking for earlier. As though Lynch was just massively trolling the audience. And then, as I said, that seems to be a lot of trouble to go to do all that, to even have pieces and parts in there that are very clearly serious storytelling and advancing a narrative that was begun years ago. Was that just Mark Frost? Was that just Mark Frost, Lynch indulging Mark Frost? Was that more trolling of the audience? Was it like setting them up like, well, if we make it exactly like it's a real continuation and we're very earnest about it, then they'll really be knocked out when they get to the end? I don't know. Did Lynch think that? It's possible. Who knows? I mean, he ain't talking, and that's okay. I don't think he needs to or should. And Frost has made ambiguous comments. He's not as inscrutable as Lynch, but he does kind of throw little tidbits out there. He's a big mystery buff. He's a Sherlockian. He wrote a novel referring to Arthur Conan Doyle, and he's a mystery fanatic. He did some other pastiche work on detective characters, I believe, that I'm forgetting, but basically, Twin Peaks was a mystery, and Dale Cooper was a kind of Sherlockian detective, albeit cross between that and the occult detectives, the kind of kind you saw in the early part of the 20th century, and that heritage and that literary legacy is steeped in the last several episodes of season 2. Even though Mark Frost by that time wasn't writing it himself, a lot of his ideas were being explored by other writers like Robert Ingalls, and of course Lynch himself in the last episode came back and gave his spin on it, and that's some deeply esoteric stuff. I mean, it was fun, it was exciting. Sometimes it was dull when it got into some subplots that deviated too much from the overall effect of Twin Peaks, and that's a criticism that a lot of people have made about Twin Peaks, including Lynch himself, who doesn't like most of Twin Peaks season 2. But again, we were fanatics. We loved Twin Peaks, and it was all Twin Peaks. It was all good. Even the little weasel running through the dance hall or whatever, and then you see it from the weasel's POV shot. I forgot the name of that animal. There's some kind of rare weasel that Benjamin Horne happened upon. I mean, even things like that, we accepted because it was Twin Peaks, man. I mean, it was more Twin Peaks, and it was part of that addiction is the characters and the milieu, and that is exactly how we get addicted to soap operas. And soap operas, in addition to mysteries, were the other biggest influence initially on Twin Peaks. Now, like I said, as time went on, the occult and supernatural things began to dominate, which is cool. But the soap opera angle cannot be underestimated in the old series. And there's even a good bit of it in the missing scenes from missing pieces, the deleted scenes from Fire Walk with Me. There's like a continuation of those subplots, and I think Lynch thought, I need to make this leaner and focus in on Laura Palmer and Bob and Leland, and not sideline with all this kind of fan service to the people who want to see what these people have been up to. But he did shoot it, and it is part of canon. But yeah, Lynch said that he had been addicted to Another World for a while. One of the better long running soap operas, now defunct. I think it ran for about 30 years, possibly, ending in the 90s, maybe the mid to late 90s, I guess, possibly late 90s. And they began in the 1960s, but I forgot what year. But I grew up on that show. It wasn't one of my very favorite soap operas, though. I went through a period in 89 to 91 where I followed it pretty closely. But, you know, so those things were woven into the DNA of the original series. There's not a lot of that soap opera stuff in season 3, The Return. I mean, there is continuations of some of the subplots, and again, there is some payoff in them. And so if we go by the thesis of the guy who explained Twin Peaks definitively, seemingly, no, really, he did, then we get the notion that, again, that was just fan service to like throw the viewers off because, oh wow, now we see what happened to Ed and Norma and Nadine. This is awesome. I mean, even I was thinking that when I was watching it. I loved that subplot. I wasn't as invested in it as I was what was up with Cooper and everything, but I loved it. I thought it was great, and it was very classic soap opera, and just very, very well done. And you finally got closure, and closure is a big thing that the man who made this video that I keep referring to, whose name I still can't remember, closure is something that he, keeps coming back to, is something that we are Twin Peaks fans, we are in need of. We have been in need of since Fire Walk with Me played in the theaters, and since the original series was canceled. I did want closure. I really just basically wanted a continuation that delved into the mystery. This is just me personally, and I wanted the mystery fleshed out, and I wanted more of the symbolism to go deeper, and kind of the trail they were on in the movie and in the end of season 2. And I didn't really expect an explanation. I did expect more of the traditional Twin Peaks characters, not necessarily the soap opera-ish subplots, but just more of them on camera. We had quite a few new characters fleshing out the series, and part of that was maybe necessary because several key cast members from the old show are deceased. And now, since The Return has aired 3.5 years ago, a whole slew more of them have died. So if Lynch wants to ever, which I don't think he does, but if he ever wants to revisit Twin Peaks, he better hurry up and shoot it before Kyle MacLachlan, passes away, which I don't think is going to happen, and I don't want to have happen, but, it would just be the foul nature of the universe, the unfairness of things if that happened when, Lynch is like, we're going to go ahead and do season 4, and then something happens to Kyle. So what are you going to do? I mean, he already lost his other main character, an actor, Michael Ontkeen, who played Sheriff Harry S. Truman. He was the, title, in their credits, he was the equal weight co-star. I mean, his name wasn't first, but it was second right after Kyle's, and he was depicted as the second lead character. He doesn't appear at all in the film. He's mentioned once or twice in passing. The character, obviously. He's mentioned quite a few times in The Return, but never seen. Apparently his character is dying of an illness. Lynch got around this really well. I don't know if Lynch offered this to Ontkeen and he turned it down because I believe Ontkeen is retired from acting. I don't know if he was retired from acting when Fire Walk with Me came out. He may have just been like over Twin Peaks. Even Kyle MacLachlan wasn't going to originally appear in the movie, and then he changed his mind, and then Lynch expanded his role, and that presaged a lot of the material that also comes up in season 3, The Return. So Alan Keen, though, originally his part back in 1989, I believe, was cast with Robert Forster, who's was a little bit older than Lon Keen, not much, and he was going to be Harry Truman, but then some other work came his way, and he opted out of doing a TV series weekly, and then you get Michael Onkeen as Harry. So, in a brilliant little switcheroo homage, Lynch and Frost create the character of Sheriff Frank Truman, who's the slightly older brother of Harry, and played by Robert Forster. So, and I really do wish there was more of him on camera in this season because I love him. I'm a huge fan. I was sad to hear of his passing not long ago. That guy has a quality and authenticity to his acting that is among the most raw and poignant and real of actors I've ever seen. A guy very underappreciated and not utilized to the full extent of his talents in his lifetime, though he did have several very shining moments. Obviously, in Jackie Brown, which he was nominated for an Oscar for his work for, and deservedly so. He should have won. I don't know who won that year, but I don't care. But Robert Forster should have won. So season 3, like I said, it was like our expectations going into it. So what actually happens in season 3? Wow. Okay. Well, I mean, a lot of ground is covered because we're talking about what is now boiled down to like a nearly 18-hour movie. It was arbitrarily divided into episodes to maintain that episodic structure. Again, giving the appearance that the series is back. This is season 3, but in a way, it's really not. And really, it's just, as it says here, a limited event series. And it's one piece, The Return. It's not even called The Return on the material, but that's officially called Twin Peaks: The Return. It's never officially or unofficially called season 3 on any of the materials, but it is, of course, referred to as season 3 by us fans, for shorthand, because that's basically what it is. And yet it's not. It's kind of like Firewalk with Me taken to the nth power. It's like, as I understand it, Lynch and Frost did a 500-page script. They originally arbitrarily divided the episodes, not really much thought of, okay, what's going to happen in this episode that's going to build to a conclusion and a cliffhanger for the next one. So that TV structure wasn't there. It was just like, we're going to chop it up into 9 episodes. And then so much material came to Lynch as they were filming and as he was working on rewrites that they went ahead and asked for an expansion to 18 hours. And so it really was like an entire season. So that even further bolstered that perception. And what makes it a TV series is the things I mentioned earlier, that opening credits, mild credits of the crew, no actors, with the old Twin Peaks opening footage and music, and the closing credits done to a different band each week, with Kyle MacLachlan declared as the star and just whoever appeared in that particular chapter or part episode. But the same people worked on all 18 hours. So it's one piece, it's one body of work, and I think it should be appreciated that. So in that sense, for instance, on my Letterboxd list, I listed it as number 1, my number 1 favorite film of 2017, because that's how it's listed in Letterboxd, as one unit. And I think that's great. It's like a faux TV series season, but it's really a long, long movie. And that's why something will happen, say in episode 1, that you expect to have some kind of going in, like something incidental will happen, no explanation given, and then you're expecting, especially if it involves the character you're familiar with, and you're like, oh, there's so-and-so, I want to see what happened to him. And then the episode goes by, they don't appear again, then maybe another episode goes by, they don't appear, and then that little strand is picked up, 2 or 3 hours later within the 18-hour body of the work, which is fine. That makes sense. It's just a slowly paced and structured uh, film. Um, but it kills the illusion that it's a television series by any normal definition of making the episodes, episodic television, or making each episode at least not completely standalone, but a small unit of entertainment. In long form television now, long form storytelling, which I of course do my own long form storytelling with Flicker Street because I grew up on soap operas and Marvel Comics continuity. So blame them. I Within that format, that format has become popular. It's become ubiquitous. TV series now have shorter seasons, and each season kind of has an arc or a theme to it, and it's continued over into the next season if it's renewed, and then therefore they're a little more like soap operas. But the episodes are still structured in an episodic fashion. So Twin Peaks, the timing was brilliant because in this era of adult graphic long form storytelling in television, it just happens to coincide with when he's doing Twin Peaks. So he struck while the iron was hot, but he anticipated a lot of this with the old series. This a lot of his DNA is in those shows, and a lot of the creators of those shows say, hey, we wouldn't be doing this without David Lynch. And some of my favorite shows like True Detective and Hannibal, I mean, good Lord. I mean, it's obvious that they're massively indebted to the old Twin Peaks series, and with good reason. So that kind of explains the structure. What actually happens? Well, I keep kind of diverting from that. Like I said, Kyle MacLachlan plays 3 different characters physically, 3 different discrete characters, beings. But one of the 3 characters, he plays 2 different personas in 2 different personas. So he's playing basically 4 different characters. One character is mistaken for another, though. He plays Dale Cooper, but his time with Dale Cooper is basically in the beginning, the opening scenes in the Black Lodge and in the White Lodge, and then toward the end, he's finally restored to his right mind. Mr. C stays Mr. C through the whole series, and he was an original series character. So it's interesting to see how he diverged from Dale. His time on Earth was spent growing decadent and weathered and powerful and cruel and evil. Brilliantly done. Mr. C is like to me, the crowning accomplishment of Kyle MacLachlan's career. I mean, never mind just the fact that he was juggling other characters, but the fact that this character was so prominent in every episode. He was the guy we watched. He was the villain, and he was one of the most memorable villains to ever come on screen, and he was definitely the shadow self of Dale. It's like in the old series, we see the good Dale that ended up in the lodge, and in the new series, we see the evil Dale that came out of the lodge, and perfect continuation, flawless. Again, that seems to be a lot of trouble to go to just to kind of, have a go at the audience. But maybe that's how incredibly talented these 2 guys were, that their storytelling abilities are that effortless that they can make that kind of stuff seem effortless when they're actually serving a totally different theme going on underneath it. Or it can be both. It could be both. Maybe Twin Peaks explained as not one explanation. Maybe it is what fans have been saying. There's a bunch of different interpretations, and people are just bickering sometimes over whose is valid and whose isn't valid. I feel like, well, let me quote someone I used to know. Not directly, but kind of paraphrase. this person watched the series, and when they started, they were somewhat of a Lynch and McLaughlin fan before I was. Kind of helped get me interested in them, actually. And this person, when season 3, The Return, began, he said, "Yeah, I really like it. It's dark. I think it's cool, you know." And so I was like, "Oh, good. He's back in the fold," you know, because he seemed to kind of move away from any interest in Twin Peaks, because I was raving on and on about it for years, and then by that time he wasn't really seemingly into it anymore. So he was watching that, and him and his wife were watching it, and we were keeping in touch with each other about our, you know, some thoughts about it. His wife had more thoughts than he did. His wife kind of was going into it with a similar mindset that I was. He was going into it with the mindset that he tends to go into everything with, which is like extreme cynicism and you know, skepticism, just down to a fault, and often the intimation that he could do better himself. And I think he believes that, and that's fine. He's wrong, but that's fine. Um, you know, so he liked it, but then he started saying less about it as it went on. And so as we come to the end, I was like, "What do you think of the last 2 episodes?" And he's like, "Well, you know, I know what it means." And I was like, "Oh, okay, lay it on me, man." And he was like, "Well, basically, it's showing that it's all pointless. There's no reason for any of it. There is no explanation. There is no point." On one level, what he said is sort of in the same wheelhouse, so to speak, as the man who explained Twin Peaks fully, no, really. On the other hand, it's much more deeply cynical than his. That's not surprising. But it's also much less informed and well rounded than this guy's work is, or even my own viewpoints. I think it's like it's expecting it to mean nothing. It's becoming more and more esoteric, and it's kind of disappearing up its own ass, so to speak. And a lot of people would hate that about Twin Peaks, have hated that about Twin Peaks and Lynch. My former friend here, he didn't hate that about Twin Peaks. He liked the journey that Lynch took in disappearing, you know, up his own rectum, but he nonetheless declared that's really all it was at the end of the day. And I don't see it that way. And I don't believe all of that is nostalgia. I believe the work in the return is resonant to the point it is because of nostalgia in our minds for the series and for the movie, which is much more like tonally. But also just its own, as its own work, it's a great work. I mean, it's a Lynch work. It's thematically and structurally and cinematically in line with his last several films. It's in line with Mulholland Drive and Inland Empire, and he kind of began this whole seriously avant-garde run of films that came out every few years with Fire Walk with Me. Fire Walk with Me was the last fairly conventional narrative he did until he did the one-off Straight Story, which was his brilliant G-rated Disney film, but still incredibly powerful and emotionally resonant, but not weird for weirdness sake, not structurally particularly experimental, but it didn't need to be. You know, it showed his range is enormous. I mean, he did give us The Elephant Man. It was a lot like The Elephant Man, a true story that was somewhat tragic and very clearly and powerfully told. A lot of people missed that about David Lynch. They wanted all of his movies to be like Elephant Man, or at least like Blue Velvet as like a compromise, or Wild at Heart, which is a bigger compromise. Um, but he ended up becoming more like Eraserhead, its first feature. He ended up going full circle and becoming, to me, The Return. There are passages in The Return that are as strange, if not far stranger, than Eraserhead. It's a similar vibe. However, it doesn't evoke Eraserhead directly, like visually or whatever. A lot of people have found parallels and similarities, and that's what happens when you examine an artist's entire body of work, and the artist is like an auteur, like Lynch, to where he does have a body of work that is that is absolutely his. It's his voice. You can tell his films from other people's pretty quickly. Um, After Firewalk with Me, then came Lost Highway a few years later, and that was kind of a furthering of the strange quality. He kind of amped up the oddness, the surrealism of it, and then he did the straight story. But then with Mulholland Drive, it's like, okay, he's committing to this as his approach. And Mulholland Drive managed to straddle the line, though. I mean, it still was nominated for Oscars. It still, gave Naomi Watts a great career, helped bolster Justin Theroux's career, had Robert Forster in it for all of 5 minutes. And, it was originally conceived as a television series also. But yeah, it managed to straddle the line, whereas in 2006, Inland Empire, which didn't have really great distribution theatrically. I mean, it didn't play here at all, even for a week. And, that's when he embraced shooting on video. He'd been doing things for his website, and he actually incorporated pieces of some of those short films into Inland Empire. Um, Inland Empire was shot all on low def video and then mastered digitally to where he could manipulate the image however he wanted. And if you haven't seen Inland Empire, it's essential. It's my favorite Lynch work, non-Twin Peaks Lynch work. And it's 3 hours of a nightmare, a series of nightmares. I mean, it evokes nightmares so strongly. It is really like having one. And several people I talked to the first time they saw it was late at night, and then they went to sleep, and then they had a nightmare about the movie. Like some of the images in the movie played through their dreams. And I was one of those people. And, it's like he's in the dream world. We live inside a dream, as Jeffrey says. And of course, that's one of the core themes of The Return is several lines. Jeffrey's line, "We live inside a dream," and then of course Monica Bellucci's "Who is the dreamer?" So these are kind of themes that have appeared in literature and film and things many times in the past. Especially in surrealism, and a lot of Lynch's influence in surrealism cinematically, though maybe you don't see it visually, is Jean Cocteau and, of course, Louis Buñuel. Those are the guys who are tapping into the subconscious. Those are the early original surrealists in film. And to me, Lynch is an American surrealist. He is the absolute heir to Buñuel and Cocteau. And if he would be viewed more through that lens, I think he would be even more renowned and respected than he is. But as it is, he's kind of hitting a pinnacle now in his old age, where he's commercially well known, so he has clout. He can get some things done that are strange, unconventional, and he has tremendous respect in the art community. And of course, then there's the fan and cult community who have always supported him, and now we're happy to see that one of our own is recognized by normies, so to speak. And Lynch is just a force to be reckoned with. And The Return is his masterpiece, as far as I'm concerned. It's definitely Mark Frost's masterpiece. And Kyle MacLachlan's, great accomplishment. I know I haven't really talked much about the plot per se. I've just kind of talked about the character of Mr. C / Dale / Dougie Jones. I didn't really talk much about Dougie Jones. Dougie Jones was a being that Mr. C created that was a clone of himself, or a further clone of Dale, called a tulpa, and he was created with the explicit purpose of taking Mr. C's place when he was drawn back into the Black Lodge after 25 years. So it was his way to cheat the Black Lodge and remain on Earth to gain power and continue to be evil. And his great pursuits that are occult related are mainly to do with those efforts. And they go their plot throughout the series is Mr. C has his quest, and Dale has his quest, but Dale's handicapped because he loses his mind early on when he reincarnates on Earth and is now sharing the Earth with Mr. C, though they have not met. Um, it fries his brain, and he becomes like the Tulpa Dougie Jones. The Tulpa Dougie Jones is drawn into the Black Lodge and quickly disintegrates. To make things even more confusing or interesting, depending on how you see it, maybe both, Dale has kept this little seed, this little small metallic, ball that was kind of the seed of Dougie Jones, the original. While he was on Earth, mindless, semi-mindless, being perceived as Dougie Jones, the life that Dougie Jones had established for himself on Earth, independent of Mr. C and Dale Cooper over the 25 years. Dale had that seed, and he gave it to one of our Black Lodge characters, the one-armed man, and he created another Tulpa of Dougie Jones. But this guy was kind of, you don't see him very much, very like one scene, but as I perceived it, he was personality-wise maybe an integration of Dale and Dougie Jones, the original Dougie Jones, with the original Dale. He doesn't really say much of anything, so you don't know what his intelligence level is. Dougie Jones himself seemed like a guy of average intelligence. If Mr. C and Dale are two extremes, then Dougie Jones is somewhere in the middle. He's a mediocrity. He's the average human, average intelligence, living an average life. Some good, some bad. It's all very clear after you see the kind of warp and weave of the series, what these three distinct characters represent within Dale Cooper and within humanity, really. And there is no middle realm. We're the middle realm. We're Midgard, Earth, between the White Lodge and the Black Lodge. I have a lot of other thoughts on season 3. Obviously, I haven't talked about the extremely notorious episode 8, Got a Light, that I brushed on in my last Twin Peaks video, and that deserves some further explication. And I think there are things about that episode that also kind of refute the cynicism of, well, the point is it doesn't have a point, it's meaningless. Which can be interpreted as the guy I used to know, his interpretation seemed to be, that was his interpretation, and his conclusion seemed to be, so who gives a fuck? Who cares? That's deeply cynical and not something I believe about Twin Peaks. Or a lot of art, most art that that resonates with me. I don't believe, oh, there's no point really, so what the fuck, or I could do better, I don't have that kind of baggage on me. And the other, voice in here, the man who explained Twin Peaks fully, I'll try to get his name by the next video. There's a cynicism in a way to his conclusion. It's kind of a disappointment, a letdown, not so much a cynicism. It's kind of like we're disappointed at the end, like, oh, it didn't mean what we thought it meant, or, oh, it was all just a comment on nostalgia, our own nostalgia, and how we can never go home again. That's kind of it, the return. Dale gradually makes his way to Twin Peaks. Mr. C gradually makes his way to Twin Peaks on parallel courses. And then they're both in Twin Peaks. So they've come home, but you can't really ever go home again, because then once it happens, Mr. C is dead, and Dale is like, and now things are going to change. So why now? That juncture point, and then he departs into this kind of Orpheus-like netherworld with Diane and Gordon, and then goes through a door on his own, and then he's in another reality. Well, actually, then he's in the past, and so he's saving Laura Palmer from the original murder. And then that alters the timeline. And so episode 18 is kind of what happens when he wakes up, the next day, and he and Diane are in this new reality. And what does it all mean? And a lot of people, believe, really, people who kind of subscribe to the kind of theories as this man I keep quoting and is nameless, that season 18 codifies everything. In a way, it does explain everything, and that all these clues are accumulating and accruing throughout the series that come to fruition in the final episode 18 of The Return. And that's a totally valid interpretation, in my opinion. I mean, you would hope that that would be the case, but then, of course, the way that the show ends, that's when you break open the, either the glass half full viewpoint, which is that you can never go home again, you'll never get the answers, or the half empty one that that's the half empty. Yes, the more positive one. Then the half full, is it the more negative one? Half full is the positive one. Half empty is the negative. So the half empty conclusion would be the one I alluded to, that I repudiated, that, it doesn't really matter. It's pointless. Who cares? I'm not on either of those polls. Definitely not the latter of those polls. But I'm not quite in Congress with the video maker. But I've kind of absorbed and assimilated what he's saying, and it makes total sense. His reasoning is pretty flawless. So I'll give him that. Like I said, I love his videos in the sense that he's very intellectual and very great at communication. And of course, he's editing his videos and doing all kinds of technological stuff that I'm not doing. My stuff is technically completely lo-fi. Mine is like Inland Empire before it was fed into a computer, except without the cool shots and interesting things and great acting. Though I'm okay. But yeah. So we come to the same place over and over again. So maybe you can't ever really go home again fully. Or maybe you absolutely can go full circle, and this is what is meant to be. And there are a lot of esoteric quotes from the old series, especially, several which are echoed in The Return, which give clues to this. I'm not going to recite any right now, but the one about one chance, CHANTS, between two worlds. Fire, walk with me. Not fire walk, but fire, addressing the fire, walk with me. Still powerful to me. Still great stuff. Still the greatest TV series ever made. Okay, so I'm going to sign off. This is probably going to be my longest video ever. The other one was long and it was somewhat, well received. So I hope that the vast length of this won't deter too many people from following it from beginning to end. I think I've rambled a bit and digressed a lot as usual, but I do think I've made a lot of good points, and hopefully, and illuminated maybe some things for somebody watching, or at least felt simpatico. Someone watching might feel simpatico with me as far as my feelings about Twin Peaks, because they have that same love and curiosity about this thing that we all love, and what does it mean, and ultimately, and it's what it means to us. That's what it means as far as I'm concerned. So anyway, take care, and I will see you soon and continue this. Okay.